Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 365 for Monday, September 1st, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version on both YouTube and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this, and now you can listen to it for one episode every day of the year, as long as it's not a leap year. We have 365 episodes under our belt now. My name is Johnny, the internet knows me as Pixelriffs, and joining me, as always, is a transformed Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Yes, that may be a clue as to what you can expect on the LEGO Let's Chat Friday coming up on my Twitch channel on Friday, provided that the set arrives on time. So stay tuned and tune in to see what I'm going to be building for the next several weeks. It's a pretty big set, so I'm excited about that. But if you want to hear more about that and more about what you may be noticing behind Johnny in the video version, then you can check out the render distance. It's the extended version of the program, and that's available to our patrons. A big thank you to all of our patrons, because it is the first of the month. You are one of the reasons we get to do this show. It's completely community supported, and we just finished a promo for August, and we get to welcome 10 patrons over the course of the month that took advantage of that to join our community. Speaking of the community, when you're part of it, you get to partake in things like the monthly Minecraft Hangout. We recorded that on Saturday, August 30th. That went up yesterday. There are some wild water clearing builds, as well as a real life crochet grass block. You have to see it to believe it. So one of the things that's available to our patrons. There's also a Patreon update. We have got some changes happening on the Patreon page, and we like to take the time to run everybody through that in a conversation with some patrons live in our Discord chat when those happen. So some of the things that you can look forward to are annual subscriptions becoming available, as well as some Spotify integration features. More detail of that, of course, is in the recording that Johnny and I did on Saturday. That's also available on the Patreon page. And so that's where you can go to get all the bonuses. Like it's one of the best ways to support us, and you get a lot of content extra when you subscribe on patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
So with the housekeeping over and done, this week we're going to discuss the official name of Minecraft's upcoming game drop, and Joel is maybe going to give us a little retrospective on Westhill now it is finished. So let's start with a little teaser of that, Joel. I did tune into the end of your stream last Saturday, was it? Like over the weekend
Saturday,
at least? Yeah, and hearing you say the words, Westhill is finished, I feel like it's been a long time coming. So talk us through how all of that feels.
It has been a long time coming, and it is an odd feeling. And in a weird way, like you leave a stream like that thinking like, well, I'm done. What do I do now? And you realize I still have a bunch of other things I need to not do, but like to move out of the area. It's not going to be the last time that I visit Westhill, because there's a lot of bulk storage. If I ever need grass or dirt or stone, then I have to go back there, because I've got chests upon chests of the stuff all hanging out in Westhill, because for the longest time I needed it in the area. But now that I don't, the idea of moving all of that somewhere else is not really appealing. So I'm probably going to be returning to Westhill from time to time to grab things that I need. But it is a surreal feeling to finish that up and think about what's happening next. And honestly, like it's one of those things that you don't necessarily think about, but the logistics of moving house in Minecraft are very similar to moving house or moving apartments in real life. Like there's a bunch of stuff that you want to take with you. Do you have enough shulker boxes? Like what, like, do I do that on stream? Is that going to be boring? Like, so what exactly is going to happen there? So that's one of the things I've been thinking about. And then obviously, you know, you're thinking about what's going to happen next. You know, like I've talked several times on the show about a sci-fi area. I've got to find that location or refine that location. I'm pretty sure I had bookmarked a spot on the server. So I just have to look at my notes to find that. I'm also making a list of smaller projects, because when you finish something this large, you don't necessarily want to jump into another project that's going to take almost 5 years. So I think that the thing for me is looking at some smaller things around the server, maybe some farms, even just some of the new features from Minecraft, like a Habagast and things that I haven't had the opportunity or real reason to explore because they didn't fit with Westhill, or the blocks weren't something that I needed, or the play, you know, experience wasn't something that was really necessary, because I had done all of the tall building in Westhill before the Habagast came out. Like I didn't need the Ghast to do waterfalls and like landscaping. The towers would have been very handy, but like I didn't have that at the time. But to wrap things up, on Saturday, the very last build was the extension of the East Road. I did this with the West Road, and I thought it was a really nice way to kind of cap that off, which is to pull the road out of visual distance of Westhill, wrap it around a corner, send it over a hill, something like that. So two things happen. One, when you're coming into the town from that road, you get kind of like a reveal experience of like, here's Westhill kind of appearing around the bend or appearing over the crest of the hill. I did the same thing with the East Road. It kind of curves and goes south, and it then goes around the corner and disappears. And I did it all in one stream. We started off with just the end of the bridge and nothing out in front of us. And I designed the road, textured the road, did all the landscaping around the road, all in about 4 hours, I would say. I kind of pushed it, and I was taking breaks to talk with people as they asked questions about Westhill and like the build and things like that. And I took a little bit of time at the end of the stream to like get up high and with the camera mod and kind of fly around and give like a bird's eye view. There's going to be a tour coming soon, depending on schedules and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to take some friends through Westhill and show it off, which I think will be fun, because as someone that's immersed in it, it's almost hard to talk about, because like you just don't know what to necessarily say, and you end up like feeling like you're rambling. So it's better, I feel like, to have people come in and just like comment on something, or especially if it's something that I might take for granted because I built it 3 years ago and someone's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot that I did that, which has happened before. You know, I've gone to look at something and find a reference for something. It's like, have I done this fireplace design before, or have I done this tower before, or this roof design? And it's like, I'm sure I'm having this deja vu on this problem I'm having right now. Surely I've encountered this doing medieval building for the last 4 years. And sure enough, like I'll go to another part of town, or I'll go to another area in the valley and go like, oh yeah, here's where I had this problem before. Or walking over a little creek. I even had someone comment on, I think, one of my YouTube shorts saying like, I really like the perspective of that little creek that runs from a little pond outside the east wall down into the river. And I forgot it was there until someone mentioned it on a comment. So like, so there's stuff like that that's really fun looking back over the years. But we can get into more of that in the main discussion. And I've got lots of screenshots, including some of the ones that I dug up today from very, very early on. One of the things I regret is not taking more before and after screenshots. Mm-hmm. It's still possible. I could load up a version of Minecraft that was the right, version and just do a single player world and pop to the right coordinates in the seed and take screenshots. But I didn't do things like record my blocks placed at the time, and I didn't take any big screenshots or any like before and after. I've got some, and the whole thing is archived on YouTube. So like people can go and still experience that, but it's difficult to kind of convey in screenshots when things change both exteriorly and internally. Like there's just, those aren't words, but there's so, there's so many inside details that you can't see from screenshots. And it's hard to convey in Minecraft, because once you get inside a small 5x7 house, like you can't even get the whole thing in a screenshot. So those kind of things, it's more immersive than it is a like visual presentation. And it's wild to see the difference between like 4.5 years ago, when it's just like the main gate and nothing else. Even an old Minecraft village that I ended up tearing down is in the background in some of the screenshots. So it's a wild thing to look back on. And I'll say that I didn't do the whole thing consistently. There was breaks for other games. There was breaks for other projects on the server when things came out and changed. Like we had to fix the iron farm. When moss came out in the game, we built a moss farm. And some of those projects were like a good month of streaming. So it wasn't like totally straight through. But with the playlists and stuff on YouTube, like I'm curious to go back and do like a time stamp and figure out like how many minutes. I may or may not want to know that answer into how long it's actually been.
Yeah, well, you've been sort of tracking it almost through the discussions of it we've had on this show. So I think even some of our podcast audience is probably going to be able to think back to older episodes of the show and go, well, I remember I remember Joel talking about all this being fields. So I think it's great to have a bit of a retrospective on that. Also, looking at these screenshots of the road, I think it's delightful that you snuck in one more opportunity to put a spruce trapdoor somewhere, because that's clearly just like a little like lick of dirt on the edge of one of these kind of rises in the in the path, and I think that's so funny that considering that so much of this city was built on spruce trapdoors, there's there's still one more just kind of, I guess if it's leading you into Westhill, then it's preparing you for what you're about to encounter.
We looked it up at one point, and it wasn't recently, but a couple months ago, somebody in chat asked how many spruce trapdoors had I placed, and I don't think it was 5 figures, but it was definitely 4.
Yeah,
and
I bet.
I don't necessarily think that would be a block that I was using a lot before Westhill. So even if it was in like 100 or so, it wasn't the high hundreds. So there's definitely been a couple thousand spruce trapdoors used in Westhill.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when all of the alternate wood trapdoors got added, and it may have been like shortly before you started Westhill, because it's a 115 build, I think, right? Yeah, so
yes.
I'm thinking it's probably 114 or 113 that they added all of the different like wood variants of stuff, and yeah, I think it's kind of phenomenal that not shortly after that you went, well, time to build a medieval town. There's no better time, and yeah. It makes a lot of sense. Well, congratulations. I'm looking forward to talking about it a little bit more as the show goes on, because it is quite the achievement, and puts into perspective some of the projects that I've done in the past that like I can't really say I can consider finished. Like I think the only thing that I recall finishing and feeling like I can't do any more on this in recent memory was the big like planet Apple Core thing that I built on Minecraft SOS, and even that, like, I knew what the deadline was from the beginning, so I was kind of down to the wire with finishing it. But yeah, it's such an achievement. By contrast, what I've been doing this week, rather than committing heavily to anything in Survival Guide or Misadventures, because I've got family visiting, my mother-in-law is staying over, and my office is being used as a guest bedroom, so I continued playtesting Fetcher, the Minecraft Bingo version that I play in the snapshots. And I really can't recommend it enough for people who want a quick test of all of your survival knowledge. Anybody who finds themselves resetting a Minecraft world just to go over the early parts of the game, or, you know, wants an in-game way of kind of basically deciding whether or not you are versed enough, like the Minecraft wiki of you know, playing through the game. There's some really smart stuff in there as you get faster with figuring out, actually, if I need all of this iron to make, you know, cauldrons and various other things, I can just either find a village where they've got a cauldron, or I can try and scrounge the iron from a shipwreck, or like you kind of learn where some of the more viable structures are to get hold of that stuff quickly. And there's lots of little fun ways of it expanding your Minecraft knowledge and experience. The newest additions, as I've mentioned in previous podcasts at this point, the copper lantern has just been added in this snapshot. The copper boots have replaced the leather boots that you have to add a blue armor trim to. The ghast harness was added recently, and there's a few other things like firefly bushes and stuff like that got added recently. The most difficult one I've found lately is resin, and that's mainly because there are small biomes that generate in this world, so you can find a lot of the diverse resources in the game super easily. And whenever I find a pale garden, I never find one that has a creaking heart in it, but usually because it's like 3 trees, and there is, as far as I can tell, not a way that they can make it so the creaking heart is guaranteed to generate with every pale oak biome. So chances are it's a very, very difficult find. Apparently you can also find resin clumps in woodland mansions, though, and that's something that I've had to remind myself through playing this, that there's not ever just one way of getting very much stuff in Minecraft. The only problem then being is you have to find a woodland mansion as well, which seem equally as uncommon as the pale oak biomes are to begin with. But yeah, I've found that this also helped me get used to the new dye sprites, because those are being added in the latest version. They appear in the snapshot that this bingo version is coded for, and a lot of people, when I've been streaming it, have gone, hey, what is that item in the center of the card? And it's usually a die with one of the kind of new palette sprites and this kind of like mound of material on top. And so I've started to get used to the look of them, and get used to the fact that grey dye is no longer an indistinct oval and actually has a bit more of its own kind of shape language to it. So I think, honestly, it's a really good tool for stuff like that. If people are unfamiliar with some of the art changes that come to the game, that's also a really great way of getting familiar with those.
I have yet to play Minecraft Bingo, and I think part of it is because, like, I'm sure I'll be embarrassed at the lack of my knowledge. Like, I'm the one that is checking if I can craft a certain type of stair in the crafting table live on stream, where I'm sure a lot of my viewers are rolling their eyes going like, no, Joel, you can't do those. Like that doesn't exist in the game. So I'm sure I would have a hard time. I'm curious, when you say like things have been swapped out in the game, is the card the same every time? Or does it?
No, it
change?
generates randomly. There's even a way that you can input a specific seed that generates a specific card and a spawn point. So like it will
Right.
it will do a bit of random number generation of its own if you just click random card. But there are weekly challenges that they set in the Discord community for it and that kind of thing.
Cool.
So you can replay those versions, but you can also just hit random and it will generate a fresh card for you each time. So the 25 items are constantly changing, and I believe it is programmed so it picks from certain categories. So there are some that have a certain weight in terms of their difficulty compared to others, and so if you get if you get an easier item from like the copper set, if you get something like a copper lantern or just a raw copper block that you can just very easily mine something and craft it within a matter of seconds, then you are more likely to get a difficult item in a different category. Like there is one category that I think is just recipes that require an egg, and that means cake is one of those. And so you've got to think about, where am I getting 3 buckets for just to get hold of the milk, and then also making sure that you find a chicken that lays an egg within a certain time frame. If you're trying to beat your best time, then it can be kind of difficult. So there's a lot of different options there, and I found myself skipping cards that have resin or an enchanted book, because the process of getting hold of an enchanting table in the shortest possible time in survival, it requires you to either get lucky finding obsidian or get a diamond pickaxe, which is its own task regardless of whether or not you need to get one for the bingo card. And then you found yourself spending 25 minutes just focused on that objective, where my best time on a recent bingo was something like 26 minutes. So
Right.
I don't want to spend all of that time just looking for one thing so I can enchant a book. Most of the time it's worth getting lucky and finding those in structures. Like if you can find an enchanted book in a pillager outpost or something like that, then that's usually the way to go. Or maybe get lucky and trade with librarian villagers if you can find them. But yeah, again, it keeps you flexible. Like it tests a bit of your knowledge, and I don't think it's necessarily an issue if you find yourself looking up crafting recipes and stuff like that. I use the recipe book all the time in bingo just to like quickly craft stuff instead of drawing it out in the crafting interface. So yeah, I think it's a fun way of blowing the cobwebs out, I suppose, and getting back to basics with survival if you're sort of in between things and want to give it a try.
Nice. Yeah, it looks interesting, and I don't know how I would respond to like the time pressure of like wanting to do a best time. Like I guess you don't have to do that. Like if you're not kind of going up against yourself, then there's nothing to prove. You're just trying to complete the card in like whatever the time you have, a stream, like 3 hours, like who knows, right? But I know from the community and the timing of things, I would probably feel the pressure to try to get it done quickly, right?
Yeah, and it's something that you can do in your own time if you're just trying to like casually play through it. There are game modes that allow you to play with multiple players as well, and there's even I think a sight unseen kind of game mode where you can switch off the bingo card so it doesn't tell you what's on it, and you just have to like then use your knowledge of what items typically appear on the bingo card and go around collecting everything, and that way it sort of reveals itself to you as you complete stuff. And again, that's better done with friends, just because if somebody acquires an item, you can go, oh great, okay, and now I know that's on the card, I can get hold of one of those myself, and you try and like block them from taking other spots on the card. It's pretty fun. But yeah, either way, that's what I've been doing this week. And the other thing I've been doing is keeping an eye on the news, because the third game drop of 2025 finally has a name. We will have a link to the article on Minecraft.net in our show notes this week. The article says, along with the Minecraft Monthly episode on Minecraft's YouTube account, that the team has announced the next game drop will be titled The Copper Age. Neither source actually confirms a release date for the Copper Age drop yet, with the Minecraft.net article simply saying the Copper Age drop is out later this year, and then it goes on to summarize the new additions, including copper, recipes, shelves, and the revised set of art sprites for dyes. We also got a Java snapshot this week. Snapshot 25W35A was published on Tuesday, August 26th, with new features including adding Halcyon language support. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. I'm not quite sure what the language is. But there are additional changes in 25W35A, including recipes. Hanging signs can now only be crafted using iron chains after copper chains were recently added. There are some minor tweaks to blocks, items, and entities, mainly focused on the Copper Golem. The Copper Golem's hitbox has been tweaked once again. They are now 0.98 blocks high in order to be able to pathfind in 1 block high spaces. Copper chests created from spawning a Copper Golem now correctly connect to nearby copper chests. The Copper Golem now uses the saddle equipment slot for blocks placed atop of its lightning rod. Its head equipment slot will now function like a regular head slot, akin to its functionality for humanoid mobs. There are also UI and mouse cursor changes. When adding a new server to the server list, the name is no longer pre-filled. When left empty, the default name is used. More text inputs now support selecting text by mouse dragging. Some UI components will now change the shape of the mouse cursor, for example, text inputs, numeric sliders, buttons, and scroll bars. Additionally, clickable parts of text labels like links will now change the cursor to the hand shape. This feature can actually be disabled if you prefer to have it the old way. It's allow cursor changes, which you can find in the mouse settings menu. Some technical changes in 25W35A. The data pack version is now 85 and the resource pack version is now 67. They've added a Minecraft server management protocol. This is an API which, quote, lets servers query players, tweak game rules, update server settings, and listen for real-time server event notifications, end quote. Some changes to server properties also came along with this. Several server properties have been removed in favor of making them into game rules, which allow these settings to be changed while the server is running. This affects specifically allow nether, spawn monsters, enable command block, and PvP. Those are now game rules instead of server settings. So for full details of those technical changes and more information on the server management protocol, you can check out the Minecraft.net changelog. That's linked in our show notes this week. Some notable bug fixes in 25W35A. Some Zed fighting occurring when the heads of Copper Golems intersected their bodies. Copper Golems continued their chest searching animations while dying. Chests sometimes getting stuck in inverted states after being interacted with by Copper Golems. Copper Golems not always avoiding dangerous blocks when pathfinding to chests. Copper Golems having difficulty putting items into chests above them. Copper Golems attached to leads still attempting to pathfind towards chests. Copper Golems not opening chests if given room to walk about. Copper Golems requiring at least 3 blocks of space above a chest to place anything. And even clocks functioning in the recipe book, villager, and crafter UI. Those have all been fixed along with a bunch of other bug fixes. You can find a full list in the Minecraft.net changelog. That's once again linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
There is something very funny about a copper golem going through these search animations as it's dying, speaking to the work ethic of a copper golem.
It really
I
is.
did find that kind of amusing.
Yeah, like, I must fulfill my purpose to the last breath, and yeah, it's another one of those kind of tragic things, but yeah, I'm surprised that anybody has been killing copper golems with that level of regularity, but then again, if you surround the chest with magma blocks, apparently they will just do that themselves, so yeah, I think it's great to see some of these changes coming through, especially since some of them are ones that we have talked about previously, like the fact that they can't open chests above them, like the fact that you had issues like with slabs being over the top of chests, even at like longer ranges.
Yep.
I took a brief dive into the snapshot earlier just to see if some of the other bugs that I had concerns about were fixed, and after a brief test, it's clear that they are a massive improvement now. Like, I think they are ironing out the last of the issues that most people have with them. There are still a few outstanding bug tracker issues, and I think I still see some folks dissatisfied with some of the limits on their behavior, stuff like them not being able to check more than 10 chests, or sometimes there are still like chests that are slightly outside of their detection radius. It's the fact that people haven't got used to adapting their storage systems to the copper golem yet, rather than just kind of popping the copper golem down into their storage system and expecting it to know how to handle whatever setup they have personally. I'm still hoping a fix can be found for the issue where copper golems dropping items or removing items from double chests isn't updating comparator output in certain circumstances. That's the main thing that I think is going to be a barrier to people using them for multi-item sorting, because that's how I discovered the issue was a thing in the first place. But I've noticed a couple of neat workarounds for it, like using trapped chests, because those update the comparator by just doing the thing they typically do with a redstone pulse. But yeah, I think there's a couple of issues with that inherently, like having a redstone component in the middle of a storage system or something like that. Either way, I'm looking forward to the Copper Age actually arriving, and hopefully these last few bugs will be ironed out before then.
It's actually something that kept me from continuing with my snapshot survival playthrough, was the fact that copper golems just really weren't behaving in a way that I felt I could test adequately. But now that there's been a lot of bug fixes, and because I finished Westhill, it's also a good excuse for me to pop into the snapshot more often and muck around with these things. Because one of the things that I found was a bottleneck was trying to sort out how to put enough items in a chest to then have the copper golem sort those items into that chest, but then I don't want this items to be completely drained out of the chest by a hopper below it. Like, so there's, again, the comparator issue that you were talking about. And one of the better ways to do that was with a double chest, because it gave you like one area that you could put a hopper on, and then another area that you could put a comparator on. And it made a lot more sense for incoming and outgoing. But I wasn't able to sort that out live on stream. So knowing that there are some changes to the copper golem, and because I'm also at that stage in early game playthrough in the snapshot world where my chests are starting to fill up, and it would be nice to start to have wow, say that five times fast.
I know, right?
Couple copper golems walking around, sorting things out, especially the things that I don't need a lot of, like building blocks, but like things like a spare sword, or here's a seed, or a few things that you just don't have much of yet. To store those things. Redstone components would be a great thing to have stored by a copper golem, and very fitting, I think. So I think one of my ideas to have like a small storage area powered by copper golems might be a fun way to do it. And I might try to do it low tech. Like, I might not try to have filters and a big storage array. I might just have a bunch of chests with the right items that I want manually sorted by me at first, and then just let the copper golems go through, and I'll just have to train myself to always put things in the copper chest for them to pick up and move around.
Yeah, I have a setup that I could almost retroactively add copper golems to in my main storage hall on Survival Guide, because I have a row of barrels above each of the chests that are for the miscellaneous odds and ends that I craft of, like andesite walls and stairs and the kind of things that I'm only really making 3 or 4 of at a time, and it's just the leftovers from whatever I got out of the stone cutter. And so I can imagine all of those getting filtered out of the bulk storage materials that I have, and then getting sent up to a floor where copper golems are working almost like I'm on a mezzanine, and delivering items to multi-item sorters that then end up putting all of the andesite stuff, all of the oak wood byproducts, that kind of stuff, into the barrels that I can still check from the floor. The only problem is, above that, I have a villager trading hall, and between all of the and the clanking sound of them checking all of these chests constantly, it's just going to make my storage room unbearably noisy to be in up until that point, even with some of the changes they've made to the copper golems. So yeah, I have a feeling it would drive me a little bit mad before I had the chance to really do much about that, before I could reach the friendly mob volume slider to turn it all the way down again.
Some of these UI changes are interesting too. I didn't really have it on my to-do list of changing the mouse to different mouse or cursor icons when you're over different aspects of the UI. I've never had that be a hang up in Minecraft. I've always just thought it's a cursor. Like, I can use it to click on things and it looks like I want it to. And I have some concerns. I'm glad that they have it as a toggle that you can turn it off. I think a lot of people are going to be used to just having the little arrow moving around. My hesitation is because I don't find the icons that the arrow changes into to be all that clear. They tend to be very small, and they tend to be very dark. And I feel like if they did a more cartoony Minecraft version of a text cursor, of a hand for clicking links, if it was like bigger and a little bit more cartoony, thinking about things like, maybe, I feel like the icons in Stardew Valley are a little bit like that. They move around if you put your cursor in different places, and it seems to be a lot clearer in that game from memory. So something like that might be something to consider, because when I saw a video of this on YouTube, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I like that. I think I'm going to turn that off.
Yeah, it's not something that I really noticed when I was messing around in this snapshot, but I've spent fairly minimal time in this snapshot specifically, so I'll have to go back and look again. It didn't seem too intrusive for me in the moments where I'd been going through the menus, but I haven't done that super comprehensively as far as I recall. So yeah, I'll have to take a look myself. But again, if it's something that can be toggled, then I think no harm done. I think if it's something
Yeah.
that new players can get used to, and hopefully after a bit of feedback, then if they want to make any more revisions to make them a bit more intuitive, then they can. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be the biggest thing in the world. I think it's just good to see the art department still being involved in new and upcoming changes to Minecraft, and working in the ways that they can to make Minecraft more approachable. I think the dye sprites have had a little bit of negative feedback, a little bit more positive feedback kind of filtering through as well. And so I think it's good that there are still, Minecraft is moving forward in such a variety of areas that it's not just new gameplay features that we're focused on. It's all of these little quality of life tweaks, the new F3 screen, stuff like that is kind of filtering into the discussion as well.
Oh, and I think it's a good concept. Like, I think the idea of the cursor changing is great because that's what it has happened in other games, right? It's something that people are used to on the internet. They're used to it in other games like Minecraft. I think it's just more of a clarity thing for me for a GUI perspective. But yeah, like, it's, again, to have it toggleable is fantastic, and probably accessible to resource packs, because you can change I use a dark UI on mine because I find it easier on the eyes. So if I can do that, I'm sure that there's textures available for those different cursors that, and if you didn't like one, then you could just upload your own.
Yeah, I'm perfect for resource pack creators who want to go the full 1990s website, go kind of GeoCities on it and have animated cursors and that kind of thing. I can only imagine. The other thing we should probably speculate about before we move on is when we think the drop is going to actually arrive, because we can presume based on previous Minecraft Live dates that we'll probably be getting a Minecraft Live, if not at the end of September, then probably the very beginning of October, which would be, I think, September 28th or 27th is the last Saturday in September. So chances are, if not then, it'd be the following weekend. If we get pre-releases maybe starting this week, then there's every chance it might be out right before Minecraft Live, so we can just spend that celebrating the fact that the drop arrives and getting excited for whatever's next. But I can also see them pushing it by a week and then releasing it very early in October. Does that sound realistic to you, Joel?
Yeah, I would say the time frame sounds right to me. I wouldn't be surprised if we see it September 27th, give or take. I'm kind of hoping for that, mainly because last year they also had a drop that happened just before Christmas, and I feel like once you get into October, you really start to week by week reduce the amount of snapshots between whatever's coming after the Copper Age and its release date. So I'd imagine they probably want to roll this out. But that could also hinge on how many bugs come up with the Copper Golem. There seems to be a lot that they're squashing, and in squashing bugs, sometimes you also become aware of others or create others. So that could be a thing over the next few weeks. I would imagine the snapshot tomorrow will be a lot of bug fixes, just a lot of minute changes to the Copper Golem and other things in the game that need to be tweaked. Especially if there's anything that comes up with the UI changes that they've made that they have to dial back or make work properly, or that kind of thing. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I would imagine my money is on the 27th, but it could also be the first week in October, because the first weekend in October is also it's only the 4th would be the first Saturday.
Yeah. So we can look forward to hearing about whatever Mojang has cooking in the background, but in the meantime, looking forward to celebrating the arrival of the Copper Age. We're going to move on into Chunk Mail for the week. This is where we like to read some listener email. We usually have one or two of these every week, as well as our Chunk Mail dispenser episodes where we deep dive the mailbag about whatever's on your mind. If you'd like to email the show, the listener email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Keep your emails short and to the point. It really does help them get included in the show more easily. Joel is going to read us this first one.
From Albert Einstein, adding specificity to enchantments. Hi, Johnny and Joel. I was listening to episode 364 when you talked about potentially using copper or other materials to narrow down the types of enchantments available on the enchanting table. You came to the conclusion that it wouldn't be viable because some tools just don't have enough enchantments and the system is bloated as is. I completely agree with your point regarding tools, weapons, and armor, But what about books? Since literally every non-treasure enchantment is available for them, I find it difficult to get the one that you want. For example, I got density 4 on my mace quite easily, but it took forever to get density 4 on a book to combine with it. After all, I'm not going to combine 2 maces. What if you could use various minerals to encourage specific types of enchantments for and only for books? You could make categories like damage, protection, water-related, or miscellaneous. What are your thoughts? Albert Einstein was blown up by a creeper that he didn't hit because he only had sharpness 4.
That's some calculations from Mr. Einstein. Not surprised. So I had a couple of thoughts about this. First of all, I know some players don't love working with villagers, but this is really why librarian villagers exist, is to get that one specific book that you're looking for, especially if it's a specialized enchantment like density that is not going to show up all that often in the enchanting table. Then again, I do think the enchantment table should be weighted more heavily towards some of the stuff that applies to every tool. I would love it if unbreaking and efficiency and things like that came up a little bit more. Unbreaking gets used for basically anything that has durability, so there are very few, if any, items that you can enchant that unbreaking is not relevant to. So I feel like that should be popping up all the time on the enchantment table, compared to stuff like the specialized enchantments like Riptide and Piercing and Density and that kind of thing. Obviously, that doesn't solve Albert's problem, but I do think that's maybe related to the reason librarian villagers are there, is to get hold of whatever small books you want, including those treasure enchantments that you can't get from the enchanting table. Personally, I think having a specialized enchanting setup just to deal with books doesn't feel right to me if it doesn't also influence the other things you can enchant, unless it's an addition to the enchanting setup that we have, or like an upgraded version of an enchanting table that's specifically for books. Maybe if it was an enchanting lectern instead of an enchanting table, then maybe it could be relevant just to books. But I do kind of wonder if there was... it's difficult because Mojang doesn't like to completely erase old features. So because they develop so additively, enchanting is unlikely to change in a way that it doesn't benefit the system holistically. If it's just for one area of enchanting, that feels a little odd. But I wondered if they could take a slightly different approach to enchanting in a similar way to how they were intending to change villager trading so that you got specific tools and specific trades from villagers in different biomes. So like the swamp librarians were going to be the only ones who would trade you mending in the rebalanced villager trades. I wonder if you could do something similar, still encouraging the player to travel, but have the enchanting setup draw power from different locations and different biomes, almost as though there was a sort of elemental shrine component. So like as Albert's example went, you could have something that was a category for water-related enchantments. What if those worked better if you set up your enchanting table within a certain amount of blocks of a river biome, or even in an ocean biome or something like that? It would perhaps encourage different approaches to builds, and if it was just increasing the likelihood rather than completely shifting so that you could only get respiration or aqua affinity or whatever out of the enchantment table when you were next to water, if it was just a likelihood thing and it rebalanced the enchanting setup, I think that's subtle enough that you're not going to pigeonhole players into only behaving a certain way, but it also maybe encourages players to go a little further afield and set up micro bases here and there in the different environment to get the enchantments that they were looking for.
I like the idea of having elements close to the enchanting table, encouraging different enchantment likelihoods. So having a block of water, a block of lava, or maybe you need more than one. That could be really interesting, both from a function but also from a decorative standpoint. Because I find that like whenever you set up an enchanting table, it's going to look the same pretty much everywhere you do it. I've gotten to the point where I hide mine. Like I'll put an enchanting setup in the ceiling, so the only thing that you can access is just the bottom of the enchanting table, and you don't have to look at the ugly bookshelves in your sci-fi build or like whatever you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So having the ability to decorate something differently, or like have your enchanting setup, like have the enchanting table in water, like, and that to me evokes all kinds of cool decorative ideas, where once you've got the essential, we'll call it 8 water blocks maybe surrounding the enchanting table, there's nothing to say that you couldn't turn that into a really cool looking little pond with a waterfall and some fish and stuff like that, and have it still function as your enchanting table, but it's going to give you all of the water related, enchantments at a higher rate, as you said. Something that I like that you mentioned as well was the idea of building upon what's existing, and maybe we get different enchanting tables. Like right now you use diamonds in the enchanting table recipe. What if you used gold bars? What if you used iron ingots? What if you used lapis or redstone? Like those kind of things could be really fun. What do those enchanting tables look like? Are they drastically different? Are they just the same thing with, red and yellow corners? Hopefully they wouldn't be. Hopefully they would look different. But I also struggle to think of any time that I've used an enchanting table decoratively. It's always been a functional block for me in Minecraft. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, it's a funny shape. It's got an animated book on the top. So like it's not going to fit in other builds depending on what you're using it for. In the same way that a lectern, you can use it as designed to function, to hold a book, to flip through a book. But it also can be used in redstone. You can also, I've seen people use it as railings, right? If you put a trapdoors on top of it and you look at it from the right angle, it really works as like ornate, like wood pillaring, that kind of thing. So depending on the design of any potential new enchanting tables, it could be cool if they had some cool functionality, but then they were also a building block that you could use in the game to decorate things with, right?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it'd be fun to have. You're talking about the different materials here, like if diamond, because diamond is valued for its hardness, contributed more to you getting unbreaking out of that enchanting table versus redstone, maybe because it's sort of about speeding things up, or like because redstone already influences potion brewing to extend the time that a potion is active, so maybe that's a catalyst for it being something to do with efficiency or anything like that. I think there's a number of justifications you could make there, but I do like the idea of it weighing the enchanting system around a little bit. I think ultimately enchanting will need to be revised at some stage just because of the amount of bloat the system is already experiencing, with so many new tools being added with specialized enchantments and stuff. But I think there's still an idea out there that maybe fits a little better than some of the stuff that we've come up with on the show so far. So we'll keep our ears to the ground and see if anything can be rebalanced about enchanting in future. For now, the second email comes in from Travis Plow with the subject of a tarnishing touch. Hey Johnny and Joel, what if there was a mechanic for tarnishing a copper object such as a door, a block, or what have you, by interacting with it with a damp sponge to progress its oxidation state? Or possibly instead of a damp sponge, a new sponge item crafted with a damp sponge as part of it. I'm unsure what other item Mojang would choose to make a part of the recipe. Blaze powder to act in the place of sulfur, or perhaps magma cream? Copper in real life does oxidize faster in the presence of water, sulfur, and a few other things, but the major focus on copper in the last few updates makes me think of this as a solution for gaining copper objects in their various states, without either having to make a copper aging flying machine or raiding a trial chamber. The possible tarnishing sponge might even have a durability value that returns a dry sponge back to the player once the sponge breaks, allowing the player to re-wet the sponge, then craft it back into a tarnishing sponge. What solutions can you two think of for this copper conundrum? Travis Plow stood in the rain too long in his copper armor, tarnished, unable to move. Please bring an axe.
I really like the tagline. I think it's always clever when people are not dead, but still otherwise incapacitated in a humorous way, and I find those really, really, really clever. I feel your pain as I've been working more lately with copper, with the stills and the other things in the distillery in the basement of the Westhill Keep. I really wanted things to age faster. Like I really found it frustrating as I was walking around trying to finish things up that I was waiting for certain patinas of copper to arrive if I didn't have them already. And I didn't have a lot of copper in my inventory, so I was kind of limited as to what I could do. And so while I appreciate what Mojang is trying to do with copper aging and making it feel like real time has passed, I do feel like it takes a little bit too long to see natural results in Minecraft. And that could be just my modern gaming impatience creeping in. But I find that when you have blocks together where that slows it down, it's not ideal. Like I feel like when you have blocks together in a copper build, you kind of want those textures to happen sooner. So I would almost want the reverse. I would almost want copper to age slowly if it's by itself. And if you got 4 or 5 copper blocks together, they would age a little bit faster. I understand that it's got something to do with obviously oxygen and more sides of the block being exposed to air blocks and things like that. But I feel like the process could be reversed to have a little bit more of a more, I would say, accessible feeling for the player, because you don't really feel like you've got control over it. It's the same thing that we experience, I think, with mobs and lighting. Like, no matter how far you are in this game, no matter what powers and prowess you have as a player, you still have to deal with block light and mob spawning when you don't want them to. And there's nothing that the player has, even at super endgame, to handle that. And I feel like, as someone that's been playing at endgame for quite some time, to still have to like sit and twiddle my thumbs or go do something else while I wait for copper to age is a weird feeling as a player. I really like the idea of a sponge, though, because it takes something that's existing in the game. It's something that's pretty rare, and using that to oxidize copper in the same way that you use the axe to strip it, I think is really interesting. I like the forethought not to have the sponge consumed when creating the damp sponge or the tarnishing sponge, as I said. Because those are usually pretty rare. Players don't have a lot of them usually, and I think that's an excellent kind of forethought there. I'm not sure how I feel about having yet another item that does one very specific thing in my inventory that I have to carry around when I'm working on something like a copper build. That's why I like the axe so much for stripping the copper, because you strip wood, you strip copper, you have an axe on you most of the time for just about everything when you're building in Minecraft. So like, it's a tool that you have on you already, so it doesn't feel like an ask to use the axe to strip copper. So I don't know what that would mean. Like, I'm not sure what other idea you would have for a copper tool like a tarnishing sponge that would oxidize instead of strip the oxidation without it having being something very specific. Because like the brush, you know, like I don't know if I've ever even crafted a brush in Minecraft because I just don't use it. I mean, like, not in on the Citadel. I've done it in like a snapshot server and stuff like that. But it's one of those things where it's that balance, you know, of how things go. And unfortunately, I think the in-game solutions that Mojang has designed for I need more copper and I want more control over it are the trial chambers. Like, if you want a lot of copper at its oxidized state so that you can choose reverse which one you want, mining out a trial chamber and conquering that is probably your best bet. That again is one of the things that's on my list of things to do on the Citadel, because like, I have very little copper right now, and so to go through and fill that up would be a fun stream. And I've never cleared out a trial chamber, so that kind of thing could be fun. And then of course, as Johnny I'm sure will attest, that when you're more technical and you have the time and the know-how, then a copper aging machine is one of the other ways that you can do the opposite, which is to bring copper forward and age it to the level that you want.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the gameplay introduced at the same time as copper, or at least like it wasn't necessarily even introduced at the same time, but when they pitched copper at Minecraft Live that year, I think it was 2020, because they were talking about the Caves and Cliffs update, they also pitched archaeology, which did not turn up in the game until much later. But both copper and archaeology are features which require the player to slow down a little bit and think more about a long-term approach to stuff, because of the whole situation with archaeology requiring you to use the brush and be careful with what you're doing and sort of slowly excavate an area and not rush things. I feel like copper was sort of the flip side of that from a mechanics perspective. It's like, it's a building block that you can build with all you want, but it's going to take some time before you see different results from it. And I can see why that rubs up against the issues players have with impatience and wanting a build to be done and finished before they can move on, rather than, you know, putting an entire copper roof in a build and then not feeling like the build is done until it's got to the weathered copper stage that you want, or it's got to the stage where you can kind of do a gradient or some shading with the copper and leave it at certain stages. So yeah, I can see both sides of this. As an advocate for copper as a mechanic in general, like, I think I've seen a lot of different arguments, and I think they've all got a place here. Specifically for the tarnishing sponge idea, I would be in favor of it for copper golems, because they seem to age much more slowly than other copper things. They're on a different set of mechanics. While copper blocks are aged by random ticks occurring, the copper golems, because they're entities, seem to just have this sort of timer that randomizes a value that goes on in the background that sort of slowly counts down to when they will next age a stage. You do have the option to spawn a copper golem from a different age of copper block, but for a lot of players, they're going to be expecting to make the copper golems fresh and have them age over time. And I imagine this is likely to be a non-issue on multiplayer servers where the world is constantly loaded and the stuff kind of going around the clock, or any world where you play for more than a few in-game days. But I mostly haven't had a chance to try it because I don't play longer sessions in snapshot worlds, and it seems to take the copper golem a long time to get where you want them to get, especially if in survival that's the only means you have of acquiring copper golem statues, right? Like, you seem to have to create the oxidized copper golems and then just wait for them. So you're almost going to have to farm those if you want to use them as a statue in a decorative build. So that's where I can see, effectively kind of tarnishing them manually as a way of improving players' quality of life and getting the results that they want sooner. With regards to the rest of copper, I think in a small enough scale that players who have this small of like a time window that they want to be building in, you've got more options, and you have so much abundant copper in things like trial chambers, or even just the option to lay all of your copper out in a big square in a field somewhere and wait for it to age. Like, there are ways that can be gamed a little bit more effectively. But it's really just about learning those methods and deciding which of them suits you in the meantime. I like the idea of the tarnishing sponge, and I think the durability mechanic, as you said, the fact that it breaks but doesn't destroy a non-renewable item in the process, I think is a pretty smart move. I also really liked the science involved in using sulfur and therefore magma cream or blaze powder being a possibility, because again, like the wet sponge idea, involves you going to a different area of the game and seeking out a more precious resource in order to bring it back and work with it. And I like the idea of magma cream not only having a new use for the first time in a while, but also being almost like the counterpart to beeswax, to honeycomb, so that you can have a disposable item to use on copper for either purpose, whether to wax it or to oxidize it faster. So I think that's kind of a neat idea. I'm not opposed to the idea in general. I think it does make sense, and I think those are some pretty smart suggestions overall.
So you ready to talk about Westhill?
I am absolutely ready if you are. I mean, it's going to be your show, I think, from this point onwards. Although, like I said, I have a little bit of experience with finishing or not finishing large projects, and so I will try my best to chip in where I can. So take us back to the early days of Westhill, and you've got some screenshots flooding the chat already. So once again, I'll try and put some of these in the video version so that they can illustrate a bit more of what Joel is talking about here.
So, as I mentioned before, it was November of 2020 when I first started working in the area, and I had already built the bridge and a couple of other things, I think. I don't remember. I think I did that on stream, but the screenshots that I have on hand this morning were from November, because that's where the playlist starts. I think it could have been a hard drive where I lost the VODs, or something happened where the VODs just weren't being archived on the YouTube channel. But I do have some map screenshots from above that will illustrate like just how empty the valley was. And in particular, I've noticed like the landscaping that I've been doing over the last month or so, with the riverbanks and the hillsides and stuff, covering everything in grass and bone meal and making everything look really lush, really do a lot to kind of like hug the valley and kind of keep your eyes kind of like focused on what's happening in front of you, rather than like seeing like all these cool builds and then like vanilla Minecraft happening just like 100 blocks away. It really is a nice way to kind of frame things up. And so I feel like as I've been walking through the build the last few weeks, thinking about wrapping it up, making the list of things left to do, one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing is not flying around. and that's walking down the roads, walking down the paths. It's also nice to do on stream. It gives me a chance to talk to chat and like be able to engage a little bit more, because I can do that a little bit easier while I'm just walking down a road. But having spent so much time on these roads and so much time on the player perspective and like what you're seeing when you're coming around a corner and how different things are framed, very similar to how a video game would be crafted, similar to like say like Legend of Zelda or a game like World of Warcraft, when you walk around a curve in a road and then the whole of Orgrimmar is revealed before you, or things like that. It's cool to have that control in Minecraft and kind of steer the player's experience in that way. And so when I look back, it's just wild to realize how empty and how, I don't want to say like uninfluenced, but like not uninspired. It's more like trying to remember what gave me the idea to put certain parts of Westhill where they are is kind of lost on me. Like I know a lot of it was encouraged by the landscape, and some of it was just like, that's a really big hill. I don't want to take the time to mine that out. So let's not flatten the area. Let's kind of work with what we've got. And so if that's the highest point, that's probably where the peak, the keep and the peak of the town would be. And if it's higher up, that's probably where maybe the richer people would live. So the houses up there are going to be fancier compared to the lower areas or an eastern area where there might be a village or a church or a market. And I think that alone was just inspired by the fact that there was a small Minecraft village where the East Market of Westhill now is. And I'm pretty sure the town center roughly is where the well is, in the center courtyard in the east. So there were little things that Minecraft had given me from world generation, that I was kind of grasping and taking on. Some of them were the rivers. Typical to back in generation for 1.15, the rivers weren't connecting. So unlike caves and cliffs where you can get much deeper, much more long rivers, these were hinted at. You get like little ponds and little like almost like little leapfrog bits of river biome. And I went through and connected them all. You could see where they were kind of trying to go, but because the topography didn't pull down far enough, Minecraft didn't fill that with water. And so I had to do it manually. And I remember the toil of having to take buckets and fill in these rivers manually, to the point where they would be easy to move around in and decorate, because otherwise you just end up with a lot of downward flowing water. So there's a lot of those kind of things that early on there was a lot of legwork that really didn't look like much. So it was really hard to get through that first even year of like trying to make it feel immersive. It just kind of felt like not unrewarding, but it felt like a really long road ahead of you. But I'm a pretty patient person, and I'm a very patient Minecraft player. And as I mentioned, we're at the end game on the server. Like the server is 8 years old, so I kind of want for nothing. If I need anything, the only grind is just taking the time to mine it. I usually know where it is. I have the tools to get it very quickly. We've got elytra, we've got shulker boxes. So like if I need a shulker box of gravel, I can do it in 20 minutes. So that kind of stuff is nice. And knowing that, I was able to just kind of like, well, I'm doing this live on stream. I have, to my knowledge, very little, if any, playtime off stream for Westhill. Part of that is just because I don't often have that free time. I kind of needed to incorporate Minecraft into my work in order to make it work as a hobby. So when I was streaming my Minecraft and playing on Westhill, that's when it was being built. And in a cool way, that means you can go back to like the Sigil VODs playlists, which I have one for every year. So 2020 through 2025. And you can go back and watch all the different VODs. Now, they're not all Westhill. Sometimes there's the bop over to like a geode or a copper farm or a moss farm. But they're all pretty clearly labeled in the stream titles as like, Moss Farm parts 1 through 6. And then it goes back to Westhill or something like that. So for anybody that's just interested in Westhill, you can easily find the VODs. But it's interesting to see that this has not been something that was planned out and creative. It's not something that was built with hours and hours and hours off stream, and then you just like tune in the next time and go, oh, the whole wall's done. Nope, I was doing it all live. And so that kind of stuff is really cool, because in my mind, that's not something you see a lot of on YouTube. YouTube videos traditionally with Minecraft, it's a lot of behind the scenes work. Sometimes like people do it on stream, like YouTubers will do that work on stream, and then showcase on the 20 to 40 minute video the little highlight clips of what's happened in between. But for me, it wasn't something that I had the time to do. I didn't have the YouTube following. My Twitch following is what really took off. So that's where I focused all of my energy. And I think it's good to have this kind of media out there to show Minecraft players that see these mega builds on YouTube to just understand how much time is put into them when you take your time, when you want to design everything live. I don't like building things twice. So that unless it was a redstone thing, I'm probably not spending much time in creative planning it out. I think the only thing that might have been an exception was a slice of a building. Like if I had a repeating pattern, like in a church or in the keep, and I was like, I'm not sure if this is going to work. I need to make sure that I build this as like a 3x20 slice. And then if it works, I can then repeat that process in the world. And so that's probably the closest I ever came to working on anything in creative. And a lot of it is just the tools and tips and tricks that I kind of picked up over the years to just like building tall roofs. How do I frame out buildings? Like what are the best ways to plan something out without, again, in survival mode, not building the whole roof and then realizing you've put it in the wrong place or you don't like the shape and then ripping it out. So I've started doing not scaffolding, but like almost like wire frames to roofs and using my experience as an artist to say, hey, if I sketch this in Minecraft and put as few blocks down as possible to just get an idea, if I do something wrong, I have far less to take down than if I actually build the whole thing and fill it in before I can actually visualize that. Now, unfortunately, not everyone has that ability. I can really look at an empty space and kind of imagine what's there. And then I'll use a couple of blocks to measure the height of something or the width of something. And I'll be just like, yeah, that'll work. And I can just go to it. Some people have to fill it in more before they can really understand what it's going to look like. But I really only need a couple of markers in place and space for me to do that. So it did speed things up a little bit. And it's really been a lot of fun to see everything come together. And in one of my videos that I just recently posted, I was talking about how if I was to kind of pass on any advice on projects of this scale or this nature, would be to not rush it and just be consistent with it. And if you can find different things around, like if you lose interest in building the town wall, well, then build a house or build a farm. Like have a couple of different areas that you can kind of bop around to so that when you're tired of seeing gray and brown in medieval building, you can go and build like a bee farm where it's got bright colors and, you know, bees and flowers and fun bushes and things like that. Because keeping things fresh and finding a way to continually enjoy plugging down the road on a project like this, it quickly becomes rewarding. I don't remember exactly when in the 4.5 years, but at some point, it became really fun to walk around the town and work on things because everywhere I looked, I couldn't see the edge of the town. Like I was just on busy streets and I would see rooftops for as far as the eye could see from the player's perspective. And that was when it started to become really rewarding. And I started to really enjoy like, well, what's the next house going to be? Like, how's this road going to go? And like, I've got the organic plans of like the Western Quarter and the Eastern Market and the shanty town to the south, like all that kind of stuff. I didn't have those ideas when I first started. I had the idea for a gate. I knew I wanted to put a wall around a town, and I knew that the keep that didn't exist was going to be up on the hill somewhere. And I just kind of like leaned into it and started going. And that was probably I think the best decision I made was to not be caught up in all the planning and do some rough planning and then just go. Just start placing blocks. I mean, the only thing that you lose if you decide to change anything is just the time that you put in. It's not like you can't undo something in Minecraft.
Yeah, it's often, I think, a lot of players wish that there would be some kind of like Control Z, like an undo shortcut in Minecraft. But the fact is, destroying things or at least like remodeling things is just as physical as the process of building them and sort of requires a similar amount of time, right? And speaking of which, I'm pretty sure you demolished the village there fairly early, right? Was there ever a discussion in your mind that said, I will try and keep this village and integrate it into Westhill. Does any of that village actually remain? Did you keep a house and sort of remodel that, or did you just level the entire thing and move on?
The layout of the village inspired the layout of the Eastern Market.
Right.
So
Okay.
the center of the village, I don't think it had an actual well. I feel like, oh, it might have had like a bell or something. And that
Yeah.
is roughly where the well was. I adjusted it to suit, like, I wanted to build a church and I only had so much room between the river and the middle of town. So I think I might have moved the middle of town just to make sure that the church would fit. Uh, but the road that you follow that takes, like, after the stone bridge that crosses the Westhill River, the road that then curves south was essentially one of the roads in the village.
Uh-huh.
And I've torn all the houses down, but have replaced them with, like, obviously cooler looking builds in the inn and the carpentry shop and stuff like that. And the topography in the area, though, remained very, very much the same. The village was one of those villages that was, like, broken up weirdly. Like the river went right through the middle of it. There was like a house up on a cliff. There was a house down by the river. There was no way for villagers to walk between the two. Like, it would just, the path would just kind of like go off the end of a cliff and then drop by 6 blocks, and
Yes,
then the
standard
village would pick
villager
back up.
trap that the world generation has set for them, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So, but that then inspired, like, okay, well, there's a gap there, and if I could put a bridge there, then that's a build opportunity. And then I could have supporting things to it. I have to have a road leading up to the bridge because the bridge was really high up. Like, I couldn't get to it quite easily without stairs, but I wanted a road, so I had to create like a curved road, which means I had to learn how to do a curved road that goes on an incline. And, like, picking up those skills took a minute.
Yeah.
It took a little while to figure that out. And when you get into the village on that side, um, I think the edge of the village is roughly where the east wall is. Like, it didn't really expand too far. We've got screenshots of, like, the overhead, and yeah, like the curve in the East River and the curve in the West River, they weren't drastically changed. I basically just smoothed them out and removed the sand and made it look not too much like there was a lake in the middle of the river. Like, in some cases I filled some places in, but most of the village there is pretty spot on. Like, even one of the houses that hangs out and actually kind of was, like I said, disintegrating into the river. I think that's one of the houses that I have that now has, like, not stilts, but like the foundation of it actually goes right down into the river. And instead of having a small dock or a small riverside walk, it just stops. Like, that's where the edge of the town is. And where there was a small path where the village crossed the river at, like, sea level, I now have, like, a town, not a town gate, but, like, there's definitely an overpass that bridges over that on the wall. Like, the wall has, like, an opening where boats and things could then travel through the town unobstructed. But it's got, like, all kinds of different protection things. Like, there's little arrow slots and, like, towers on both sides and things like that. So it's been fun to kind of reminisce and look and see, like, what the village inspired, what the rivers inspired. I mean, the town has its name from the giant mountain to the west. This is Westhill. And having to decide whether to incorporate that or just have it as a backdrop, like, that kind of stuff kind of influenced how the western quarter came to be as well.
Yeah. And what were the highlights of putting the town itself together for you? Are there any builds that really kind of stand out in your mind as, like, a triumph or a struggle? Is there anything that, like, sticks out specifically about the construction of West Hill that way? Or does it all feel like just a series of interconnected projects that sort of naturally suggest themselves after you got done with the last one?
It's kind of hard to pick your darlings, right? Like, it's kind of hard to look at 4.5 years of building and say, like, I like this one the most. I think one of the most iconic is the front gate. It's in a lot of screenshots. I had a viewer, listener, and fan very kindly send in a Lego set that they designed themselves to showcase the front gate of Westhill, which I've built live on stream. You can find that on Joel Duggan VODs as well. And that was a really cool experience to know that build had moved someone or inspired someone so much to take the time to design something in Lego was really, really fun. I think the keep stands out. It's one of, if not the largest build in the town, probably the more complicated one. Having never built a castle in Minecraft, that's kind of where I learned how to do that. And something I take great pride in everything in the town, not just the keep. Everything has an interior. Everything is designed inside. Everything connects. So if you see a tower, it's got a staircase inside. It has at least one or two entrances in it, and it goes to something, whether it's a bedroom, a top of the tower for a lookout. Some of the towers just have like, they go to sleeping quarters for what would be like staff for the kitchen. Like everything kind of winds around. There's multiple ways to get everywhere in the town. And in larger builds, there's multiple ways to get everywhere inside the build. Next to the keep, I think the other thing that I think is really nice is the mansion in the Western Quarter. Again, very large build with a tower in it, and was a lot of fun to just have the space to get it outside of designing small medieval towns, which like had bedroom, living room, kitchen, kind of all very one room, one floor, that kind of stuff, maybe with a loft, to transition into something that had its own tower, like a mezzanine. The main, having a hall and a home was really cool. Having like 3 or 4 levels with a bedroom at the very top and a big kitchen and like quarters down the bottom. That was really, really fun. That's also around the time that Minecraft started to expand a lot more with the block palettes and stuff. And we had like deep slate and more blocks like that to play with. Also moss and mangrove bushes. And so the Western Quarter in total, I feel as like a whole, has more interesting builds. It's denser in that there's more foliage. Like even when the village was there in the east, there wasn't very many trees. And so as a result, I just didn't think about it. And there aren't really any trees on the eastern side of the town. There are outside of it, but not inside the walls. But then in the richer area of town, in the Western Quarter, it's in a taiga forest. And I didn't cut down any trees I didn't have to. And so that I think really adds to the density of how it feels to walk through those streets. You've got spruce trees and bushes that are kind of like next to these bigger builds. The builds are usually more ornate. They have higher roofs, better peaks, different colors in the roofs. There's like a candle shop and bakery and things like that. That's where the dock is as well, and that's got a lot of detail. So yeah, I think that the keep, the mansion, and I can't think of anything really on the east side that's a standout. The stone church and the church grounds are kind of fun. There's some secret entrances and some secret passageways, and those are dotted all over the place. That's one of the fun things about Westhill, was just like putting in these little secret tunnels that like you leave, an area down underneath the bridge on the Westhill River, and it pops you up in the basement of the inn, which is 40 blocks away. Like it's just fun little stuff like that. It was just really nice to have in the build. And I like that people can walk around it and not really see anything that's not supposed to be there. If you see a door, go through it. Like you never know. It could be just a closet with a skull head at the bottom. Like it depends on what I've decided to do. But sometimes it's like, oh, there's a staircase back here. Where does that go? It goes down under the street. Like who knew? Like that kind of stuff has been a lot of fun.
You also started, just based on the screenshots that you have, the overhead for the map, you started by building like farmhouses and like a little bit of farmland around the outside. So was it always the plan to have the area feel like a kind of complete community? Because obviously with a town this large, it needs agriculture, like the stuff needs to be coming in from somewhere. But at what point did you decide the land all around this also needs to feel like a part of a function of the town even being there, and instead of just hand waving it and saying, well, they import their stuff from elsewhere and just having a road that leads out?
So I know that the area was specifically picked for the medieval zone on the server, and I had done that because of the number of biomes that were available nearby. So if anybody wanted to like build in an ice spikes, there's one there. There's a desert nearby. So any kind of medieval idea that you had in this overarching area on the server was available. I chose the sunflower plains between these rivers because I thought those would be a really good spot just to do like a traditional kind of medieval village. I hadn't really decided on the scope, but I know that I was heavily inspired by Fwip and Germsy Boy, friends of the show. And I believe that when I found the area, originally I was looking at the mountain in the west as a potential dwarven build, very similar
Right,
to
yeah.
Ironforge from Westhill, or not from Westhill, from World of Warcraft. And I was thinking about the build being in the mountain and then having like a drawbridge go to what is now the Western Quarter, and then kind of building out from there and just having the countryside. And as I was moving around and looking, I decided, I think loosely, I thought, well, the town would be probably at the other end of the valley, but I don't know what the town looks like yet. And I just remember being very inspired to build a farm and also thinking, like, if I'm going to build a giant town here, I want a place to live. Like, I don't want to have just boxes out in the open all the time. So I wanted
Right.
something to like call home. So the first storage area, the first staging area is actually under the barn in the potato farm. And that is still there. Like, there's still chests full of stuff. There's
Hmm.
like a bed, and all the different things that I was using to build everything in the area was staging from the basement of the barn until I moved into the basement of the keep. And that was a long time because the keep was not the first thing that I built. So I don't know where I was for the longest time. I might have actually planned out like the courtyard of the keep and then just built the basement first and just kind of dug myself down there. Because at some point when I started moving land, I needed bulk storage, and
Yep.
that's where the keep certainly came into play. Um, yeah, I think from the early on, like I definitely started building the farms. I don't think I had like the scale, but I knew that I wanted to walk by stuff on the way to whatever the city was going to be. And very quickly, like I think the first few videos are of me building the potato farm, the wheat farm, and the windmill, wanting to try, and not windmill, it's a water wheel, sorry. And then very quickly, I got either inspired by, I think it was a piece of concept art to do the Westhill main gate. And once I started the main gate, I kind of skipped over all of the farms between the potato and the wheat farm and started building the town. And I remember having to not force myself, but really have to kind of remember to, I have to fill this in because it's this
Yeah.
weird gap of like, here's the farms and then there's nothing. And I remember every single time I walked out of Westhill to go to the Nether Hub or to go get levels or to go get material, I would constantly be doing that like Minecraft builder apology as I walked by empty areas that looked
Yeah.
really unfinished, then walked by very finished potato farms, and then onto the bridges and the paths out of the valley. And every time I walked by, I was like, I'm going to fill these in. I just don't know what I'm going to do yet. Like I would just repeat myself over and over again because knowing it was going to be a long-term project, knowing that I wanted to fill these areas in, I didn't feel the need to rush it. I didn't have any ideas. I didn't have any inspiration for what is now the bee farm, the abandoned farm, the pumpkin farm, the flower farm. Like I didn't know what I wanted to put there. And in a way, I'm glad I didn't push it because I mean, bees would have been in the game, I think, but there certainly was not the pitcher plant. That wasn't a thing,
Yeah.
right? Um, there wasn't like the pumpkin farm is mostly deep slate for the house. Like that didn't exist back in 2020. So like there's a bunch of things that I'm glad that I waited because when Minecraft added a new block, when I found something in my research, like maybe I was looking for like a design for a medieval bridge or a medieval keep. And in the process of looking through images on Pinterest, I also found this really cool chapel design or this really cool house design. It's like, well, I can't use that in the Eastern market, but that's a really cool idea for later because it had like that blue or turquoise roof that you and I always love about certain medieval builds and stuff like that. It was nice to kind of have that inspiration kind of crop up. But no, when I first started, like I really didn't know the scope, and that's why I always say like, just start building. Like if you end up being uninspired and you have to abandon this, like, well, congratulations, you are the millionth Minecraft player to do that. Like, there's lots of people that start builds and don't finish them. But if you start something and it just sort of cascades into more ideas, you don't need to have a vision for the whole thing. It's wonderful if you do, but if you don't have one, don't feel the need to wait. Perfection is the enemy of done. And so when you're trying to work on things like this, I feel like leaning into the yes and can really help you get going. I mean, I do have some regrets in terms of like some of the designs of the town and things like that. I do find from above, which is a kind of first world player problem, you can't really notice this from the ground. And unless you're flying over the city with an elytra, you're really probably not going to pick up on it. You really have to be up high. But the shape of the wall as it goes around the church, Westhill has a very odd shape. It doesn't feel militaristic. It doesn't feel really well thought out. It just feels like I've put a wall around all the stuff that I built. And in some ways, it was cool to put the wall down and know that I was then restricting the space inside. But in other ways, had I put the wall where it probably should have gone, I would have cut the church in half. And so like I wanted the church to be in it and the river. And so it was just like, do I want to take the time, the immense amount of time to move this river or move this church or redesign this area? Or do I just want to say, well, you know what? In medieval times, they would have just built where they could. They weren't moving rivers. So you kind of like lean into the landscape and kind of accept the decision that you've made. And I think because the town grew in scope more than I had originally planned, I then also had to accept the sacrifices of some parts of it are not going to look like super cool. There's definitely some angles where like it looks okay, but then there's other angles where it looks much better. And a lot of my screenshots are from the ones that I'm happier with.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I think honestly, like if you look at the town structure of a lot of places in the UK that are like mentioned in the
Sure.
Doomsday Book or whatever, that they're all from like the sort of 10 like 00 like 1066 or whatever, like you'll find that there are so many towns where people have just kind of done whatever, and then future people have to live with the consequences of that in terms of like the building methods that were employed and like the shape of things. And like it's in places like the States where everything is so focused on like car infrastructure and stuff like that, that you find those grid layouts of modern cities that take place that you'll know, having done a modern city project of your own, at least kind of started it. And I think the interesting thing about going back into medieval builds is this notion of like, okay, what is walkable about this city? Like if people are just getting around, they're getting around with like a horse and cart maximum. So, how wide are the roads as a result? I think I really like a lot of the work you've done in the surroundings of Westhill, where there are clearly dirt paths where you've put in like, I'm just cutting across the lawn part of like the grassland outside of Westhill here. It's clear that there would be walking paths from place to place, even though the paved roads are clearly there to serve mass populations and other modes of transport and that kind of thing. So the amount of thought and detail that's gone into stuff like that, I think, is really important in making it feel like realistic enough from a real world perspective that you can forgive the stuff that is just Minecraft jank. And I think honestly the fact that the city layout is not necessarily meticulously planned just feels more realistic as a result. It feels like a human did this, as opposed to people who've created several hundred years worth of, architecture and city planning and documentation and style guides and that kind of thing. It feels organic and lived in that way, which I think is really one of the project's major strengths.
Thank you. Yeah, the organic nature is definitely something that I leaned into. I would definitely notice if I was cutting across a green space often enough as a player, just like walking from one area of another as I'm going back to get materials to go and build something, and realizing like I should put a path here. Because like if I'm walking across this is probably where people would also walk across this area. And even if sometimes that specific path wasn't the most artistic or the most attractive to put in, putting something really close to that would then just encourage me to then take the path rather than cutting across the grass. So that kind of stuff was really fun. And it's the same way with the roads. Like as the topography in the town changed, I would definitely find like, well, I'm going to build this road. What would be the natural way as a hiker that I would go up this hill? I wouldn't go straight up the steepest part. Like I'd probably try to find a relatively easy path to get up there. Same thing with the layouts for like the gates and the roads coming into town. Like what would be the path that I would go? Well, again, the road is probably going to be on the low-lying land, and that way the farms are kind of up on the hills or to the left and the right down by the rivers. The road tends to hug the river a little bit as it comes into town, and then it weaves away and goes towards the main gate. And even creating reasons later on for like, well, I've got all this space next to the main gate. Why isn't there another road, another build? Like, what's there that's preventing that? And that's when I came up with the idea to create a big swamp that drains into the Spruce River on that side. And it creates like two things. It took me a long time to come up with an idea for that area because I didn't want builds there because the town has got a wall. And if you wanted it to be defensible in any way, just logistically thinking, having things there wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't want anything too close to the wall because it would then become a problem from a defense standpoint. So having something that's there as a marsh or a swamp really kind of adds two things. It gives an obvious reason why nothing was built there, but then it also adds more defense. Like, it's like, oh, people that would want to attack the town, they can't get close enough because they'd be up to their knees in mud. And so that kind of stuff was fun to just organically come up with over time. And I think one of the things that I'm happy I did throughout the build was if I didn't have an idea for an area, I would just leave it. Like, I would just kind of like leave it, make a mental note that like something has to go there. But then as I would walk by it time and time again, as I was build things on either side of it or whatever, you would eventually come up with a thought. You'd come up with an idea about what to put there. Definitely when I do landscaping, I found a strength of like picking a key feature, like putting in some reeds on a riverbank or making a custom cliff. And then if you don't know what to do next to it, don't do anything next to it just yet. Go down the river, go down the hill, go down the road until you go like, okay, here's a bend in the road where I need to do a custom tree. Or here's a bend in the road where like a cool wharf or a cool house would look great here. Build that. Now that you've got point A and point B, filling in between is very easy. Like, you either realize, oh, I don't have room for anything in here. I just need to do more custom foliage. Or maybe it's a great place for a cart. Maybe it's a great place for something that supports one of the other builds, like a dry dock boat on the side of a road next to a wharf, fills in some space and makes sense. But you don't know to put it there unless you had the wharf there first. So that kind of stuff with these kind of builds, I think, is really cool. If you've got the mental freedom to say like, I don't need to know where everything goes right off the bat. Like, I don't need this to be Lego instructions. I need this to be inspiring for me and fun for me now. And I will figure out, I guess there's a bit of a confidence thing there too. Like, you have to know and be confident enough as a builder to be like, I will figure out what's going to go in this very odd little gap. Like, what am I going to fit into this very peculiar triangle shaped space of land, And sometimes you don't fit anything. Sometimes it just turns into an alleyway. Sometimes that's how my secret passages get formed. Like, it depends on how you want to go about doing things. It's a fun exercise. I really encourage people to try a build of this scale, or certainly start something where you could finish it. Like, it is something that will have an end in sight. But if you ever decide to return to it, it's very easy to add to it. Like, I could add windmills in the distance. I could take the road and wind it to another town and eventually connect them. Like, there's a bunch of options for that on the server. And I mean, it's also a multiplayer server. Somebody else could come in and build in the next valley over and then connect that with a road and be able to springboard from what I've already done. So those kind of things are great builds to return to because you don't have to have the pressure of like finishing it in a certain timeline. You can kind of come back to it and pick at it whenever you want. Yeah,
for sure. I was thinking about what you said earlier about Deep Slate being added and like how that had been a good thing that, you didn't start a farmhouse project earlier because you ended up using a lot of Deep Slate for that and Tough and other bits and pieces. Is there any other material you can think of that when it came along kind of changed the way you were building? Like, as soon as it got added to the palette, was like, I know you've used a lot of like mud in the places where you've used Deep Slate, but also packed mud for stuff like the roads. Is there anything else you can think of that sort of like radically, if not changed the way you were building stuff, then added to the build style in a way you can't imagine Westhill without now?
I mean, Deep Slate is the big one because Deep Slate is something that I actually waited for. Like, there were builds that I was holding off on, like the basement of the keep, the outside of the keep, and like the lower part of the keep by the river. There was a couple of other things in the Western Quarter. Like, I was 100% waiting for Deep Slate to come out for that, especially knowing it was coming doing this show with the podcast, like knowing that kind of stuff was coming. Packed mud and rooted dirt have really influenced my dirt road texturing. And on a more colorful standpoint, I'd say calcite really helped. Wanting to do white builds in the town and really not liking the way the diorite was working for me, and concrete powder was just a little bit too bright. I was using bone block a lot early on, and that's okay, but it's got a very creamy white color to it. So having something more stone looking like calcite was great. I'm just going over my screenshots. It's one of the things, like there's so many builds in this area that like it's hard to remember all of them.
I think it's also kind of telling that there's only one or two roofs or areas I can pick out where mangrove is used, and I think that's purely just because of how difficult it is to farm in larger quantities. But I feel like that also creates an interesting highlight in places like that, and the one house that's in the sort of more wealthy district where you've got a prismarine roof. Like, those really start to become standouts that kind of they feel like the exception that proves the rule, surrounded by the things that use the more traditional wood and stone palette. And I think that really helps things stand out, but is also a measure of their material scarcity because, you know, you've got places that you could farm prismarine. You've got an active server where people can build a guardian farm if there isn't one already, but you still have to deal with, where am I getting some of these resources from in the first place? And when mangrove arrived, I feel like you encountered the same thing a lot of us did, which was like, this is a really cool, colorful material. It's great that we have a red wood type, but boy, is it difficult to get hold of in a quantity that makes me want to build like an entire palette surrounding it, right?
Yeah, no, that was definitely part of that. Also, I mean, at that point, like that's all happening in the Western Quarter, and that was much later in the area. So like so many of the roofs were already done. I almost felt like I couldn't start to switch up the roof colors too much, because then it would really start to feel like two different towns. So that was a bit tricky. But I do feel like there's other blocks that I'm thinking of that they're escaping me. But I do feel like there's been a few things that have inspired. Definitely the copper for the roofs with like the prismarine, like that was a combination of like copper and prismarine in the candle shop. And I feel like, not a building block, but for planning out towers and planning out builds, scaffolding became a lot more useful. Not so much for me to get up on, like I'm not using it to go up 30 blocks. I use it to go up 5 maybe, but to put scaffolding up 30 or 40 blocks in the air as I was planning the keep, and using it to map out the tower heights. Very fast way to move things around. If you don't like it, you can cut it down in seconds. So that was a really useful tool for building the tower. But I'd say the most influential block was probably Deep Slate. And then after that, I would say the new foliage updates, like the new bushes and mangrove leaves and the new bush blocks and those kind of things have been really helpful for different things. And even the ability to waterlog leaf blocks happened while I was building Westhill. And that changed a lot of the immersion and density that I could do around the rivers. It really made things feel overgrown when you could have things like dangle off of walls and be submerged in the river from a plant life perspective. Like there's a lot of things like that really, really helped.
Yeah, that's incredible, actually, thinking about how much has changed since 1.15 and the amount of different, not even just building blocks, but like techniques you can apply to things and combination of materials that weren't possible before either. So like that's kind of phenomenal. Well, as we wrap this up, I suppose the question to sort of remind you, I suppose, is what's next? Like, are you planning on taking on a project like Westhill ever again? Like, is it something that you plan maybe like a year from now? Or are you just thinking about like seeing which way the wind takes you at this point?
So right now, I know I don't want to dive into another immediate project that's going to be super large and take on something that's going to be the same thing like every stream, or the same area every stream for a long time. I'd like to bop around the server and do some stuff. We've got some logistical things that we want to do. We had to fix all of our end portals, so all of the end gateway portals, and so they don't exist. So in order to get them back, we got to fight the dragon 20 times. So that's probably something I'm going to try to do. That will then open up more shulker boxes. I want to have a shulker farm, so creating one of those is going to be laborious. the sci-fi area that I've mentioned on the show a number of times that's like the next big idea for a project. But that is, again, like Westhill and with the lessons learned, not something I have a complete vision for. I know that I'm pretty sure in the area that I picked out, it's a large mushroom island that's over a lush cave. So there's opportunities to dig down, create some cool underground stuff. There's opportunities to have a lot of control in the top with mob spawning not happening, stuff like that. So there are opportunities there that will probably be just like this. We'll start off relatively small. I will want to think about what my central hub is going to look like, because it's probably where my storage is going to be for a very long time, and kind of work out from there. The only ideas I have so far is that I want it to be more functional. Like, so because Westhill was very decorative, I've really not done a lot of redstone lately. I've not done a lot of farms, like auto farms. So I'd like to use the sci-fi area as a way to, like, this is where I'm going to build a mob farm. This is where I'm going to build, a pumpkin farm and a little dye farm and a shifting flower floor farm, like just stuff like that. It's going to be fun. Obviously, I'm going to have the restrictions of being in a mushroom island, so I might have to venture off to nearby areas to do that. But then I have to come up with cool ways to travel between those areas. So like there's a bunch of different things that kind of like span out in that way. But there's also things on the server, like a lot of our roads in the Nether are old and cobblestone. And that's fine, because some of them you're out in the open and I don't want it to be anything fancy. But there's also the exterior of the hub doesn't look very good. We don't have a piglin bartering farm. There's some Nether things I want to do. And like, do I want to put those near the Nether hub for the server? Or are they things that I want to build on a smaller scale and maybe put them in the Nether, wherever the Nether is near my sci-fi area? So all I have to do when I'm in the sci-fi build is just go through a portal to access a piglin farm or access something like that in the Nether. So there's things like that I want to do around the server. Other areas that are unfinished, the modern city is probably where I'm going to spend some time, because it's one of those areas that, very similar to what I said earlier, when I walk through, I'm very often explaining, this is something we started in, because the scale of these builds is so big, they very often don't get finished. Not skyscrapers, but like large apartment buildings. There's different areas of the road that are just empty. They've got scaffolding up that looks like it's just not, finished. So I want to go back and work on something in the modern city for two reasons. One, it'll help the area feel a little bit more complete. Also, it's a really nice change of palette and design aesthetics from medieval Minecraft. Like, so it'll kind of like refresh the brain. A lot of concrete, a lot of straight lines. It's a little easier, I want to say. Like, there's not as much detail. You're dealing with broad building faces and a little bit more designy than you are dealing with like the very busy lived-in look of medieval like set dressing. So I'm hoping to work on something like that in the modern city. And again, I have the space there and the logistics all set up. There's a main storage. There's lots of room for living quarters and shulker boxes. So moving to the modern city as like a temporary home base is probably my next goal.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, like, after you've been living in this medieval age for this long, to want a touch of modernity and be looking towards the future. And we're going to look towards the future of the podcast by wrapping up this episode there. But no, it's been a fantastic trip down memory lane, and hopefully some of you who've been listening to the podcast for a while can reminisce along with Joel. For now, we're going to leave it there. So thank you so much for listening. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. Once again, I will recommend that you deep dive Joel's VOD channel if you want to take a look at some of the history of Westhill and have that as like a documentary to go along with this. We will also probably be taking a bit of a trip through Westhill on a co-stream that the two of us will do at some stage. So we'd love to get the tour in person, and we'll try and make that available either on the Spawn Chunks YouTube channel or maybe as a bonus thing for our patrons. Watch this space as to how we distribute that, but it'll be fun either way. In the meantime, the music for the show is composed by me. The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday, and we have monthly hangouts, like we mentioned at the top of the show, where you can let us know what you've been up to in Minecraft over the last month, and we look into build trends in the community and just celebrate, in general, what people are up to in our patron community. We currently have 278 patrons, which is up an additional 3 from last week. So thank you to everybody who signed up to help us celebrate 7 years of the Spawn Chunks. And as Joel mentioned at the top of the show, things like annual memberships are coming to the Patreon page in a series of overhauls we have planned, so keep your eyes peeled for changes to the page in the not too distant future. In the meantime, special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons who help make this show possible. That's Hunter555, Jumbo Sail, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on all the social media that matters. New episodes are published on Mondays, and that's available on Spotify and on YouTube in video format once Johnny gets that edited. Email us at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you get the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series, but expect me to be streaming a little bit less since I've got family visiting right now. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I'm going to point you towards the Citadel Cafe. Episode 497 is out right now, and that is where Steven and I talked about Fantastic Four First Steps, as well as K-pop Demon Hunters. Both got very good reviews from us, so it's a very pleasant show to listen to compared to our rant about Superman, which was 496. So there's lots of content over on the citadelcafe.com. You can also follow me again on social media, Joel Duggan, very easy to find, and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I am still streaming every day, mostly Minecraft, but who knows what's next? You'll have to tune in to find out. But Westhill is done, and it won't be the last time that we visit Westhill because all my stuff is still there. So you'll get a good look if you tune in to twitch.tv/Joel Duggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and it's just around that bend in the road.